Welcome to the EMT Pro podcast, where we deliver relevant content from the field in the classroom each month. Episodes of this podcast can get you 1 full hour of CE through our partner, emt-ce.com. So head over there for more information. I'm your host, Steve Williams, and with me today is Dan and Holly. Guys, welcome back. Say hello.
Hello, Steve.
How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm a little tired today, but I'm doing well.
You don't look well.
Thanks. Thanks. Am I pale?
I think you look great.
Oh, thanks. Holly's always so uplifting and positive,
And fake.
unlike Daniel. So we got 2 calls to go over today.
Okay.
Do some case review. But more importantly than maybe the call, or just as important, is some of the steps that were taken afterwards to deal with some residual symptoms. Not like big bad things that grew into PTSD, but like stuff that were problematic that needed to be addressed. So,
That's good. And the important thing is addressing them to begin with will help prevent PTSD.
One of the things I actually just spoke yesterday to a group of probationary members of our department about some peer support related items, and then also about safety nets and the idea of working on your safety net now, and kind of thinking about what your safety net is before you have either that sentinel event call, but more commonly is just that, regular grind that just builds up and builds up and builds up.
What do you mean by safety net?
Yeah.
Like
So what we
therapist
call
or
safety net,
friends?
it's kind of all the things. It's what you fall back on when crap hits the fan. And it's also the thing that's going to prop you back up and help you recover once you've made that, you've had that event occur, whether that's at work, at home, whatever it is, a relationship thing, a bad call you went on. It can be a variety of stuff, or it can be a combination of all the above.
Mhm.
But the safety net that you create is all the good habits that you have. So, and we kind of call this the duh slide that we go over,
Right.
but it's, good sleep, not drinking too much, staying away from smoking, things like that, but eating well, exercise, and also forming good relationships around you. So friendships, with family relationships, and it's all of those things combined that when you get overloaded and stressed out and have a negative event occur, you can fall back on those good habits to help get you through the recovery from that bad event. And so the other thing that's really important is having some form of therapy or counselor relationship built so that you don't have to go find one
Right.
Mhm.
when the bad stuff happens. Because inevitably, life's going to throw you some curveballs, and you got to be able to adjust. And the way that you can do that is by having all these things in place. So we talked about that. And this, the stuff we're going to talk about today kind of discusses those items post-call. But there's still a lot of stuff to learn from the calls, too. So excited to get some questions from you guys, and I'll give you whatever info I have, and if I don't know it, I'll probably make something up, but
I love it.
it won't be too egregious, and won't change anything, massive about the call or anything. So you want to get started on
Let's do it.
call number 1? Okay, so I'll give you the dispatch info, and then I'll let you guys, I want to hear where your brains go, and we'll go from there.
And this call just happened.
I've got 2. One is recent. One is about a couple, 3 years ago.
Okay.
So in the station, 5-person crew,
Okay.
2-person medic, 3-person engine. In our first due, tapped out for a motor vehicle accident. And so obviously tones go off, we head out, we're getting our gear on.
And so it's going to be medic, engine.
Yeah. So then with this dispatch, we also get a BC.
Okay.
Because we're in our first in district and we're not going out to a rural area or anything. So we get a battalion chief headed our way, and then we're in the rig. We hear him going route, and we're getting our gear on.
What type of a road is it on?
2-lane highway.
Okay.
Major intersection that kind of connects two towns of our area.
So, Artie, you're thinking this could be bad?
Yeah, it's a bad area. It's a
bad area.
It's a bad intersection.
Okay.
One lane of traffic is going, I want to say, about 40 through the intersection. The other one is it's like a 45 mile an hour zone, but it drops to 30 before the intersection. So, but people never slow down, you know, so they just burn through it.
It's pretty high speeds.
Yeah, decently high speeds, but not highway. But still, people go fast enough, you know, on this place. So,
is the intersection like a light, or is it more of just a four-way?
It's a four-way stoplight.
Four-way stoplight. Okay.
Stoplight, like a blinking yellow, but they got to stop coming east-west.
It's a four-way, like red, green, yellow stoplight.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. What do you call that?
Stoplight.
Stoplight. Okay. I was like, shoot. Does stoplight mean blinking red light?
I don't know, buddy.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's all good.
I think we're picturing like
Yeah.
the same thing, but okay. So it's a four-way intersection with a stoplight.
Yes.
Organized. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
So most of our, I would say the most common wreck we go on is just short of that intersection, not actually in the intersection. So people jamming on their brakes for whatever reason, you know, all sorts of things. So we're getting dressed. I take a quick glance at the computer and mentions multiple vehicles involved and one motorcyclist. And they believe the motorcyclist is pinned. So I do this thing, and my intentions are always good. I don't know if it always achieves the objective I'm shooting for, but when we have something unique on the computer, I like to get my crew's mindset in the right spot, because we go on a lot of stuff that's not critical. A lot of stuff, like 90% of what we go on.
Right.
And when there's something that is, this is going to be different, this is most likely going to be pretty bad, I like to get their brains in the right spot so that we're not responding like, ho-hum, here's another little fender bender.
Yeah.
And so when I saw the motorcyclist pinned, I announced that into our bay as I'm getting dressed, and that kind of got everyone's attention. And then I reminded our medic unit to let us leave first so that we can block as we're approaching and create a buffer zone for them, so that they can operate in a safe manner. So,
how far away is your hospital
from the intersection?
Wreck, yeah.
Probably a solid, if you're going code 3 with regular amount of traffic, probably 12 minutes.
Okay, so pretty close.
Yeah. We get an update en route, and multiple callers on this, and they keep mentioning motorcyclist is pinned under a vehicle. So we're approaching the intersection. It's not that far from our station. It's maybe a mile and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That close.
Pretty close. Yeah. So we're approaching, and it's past the intersection, is where we're headed. And it's kind of one of those like yard sales. You can just see debris everywhere.
Yeah.
There is a pickup truck that's 90 degrees to the intersection, to the lane of travel that it was in. And it was pulling a like a flatbed trailer, like a landscape type thing. It's mangled. That trailer is mangled underneath a semi, which is rested up against the driver's side door of that pickup.
Okay, so already this is different.
Yeah. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of stuff that's like, oh man. And the thing that was a challenge for me was it was such a wide scene. So I'm having to like scan a wide area and then relay that in a windshield report, you know.
Right. So can I interject? Ask
Yeah.
request real quick. And so when you read that stuff on the MDT, did you upgrade your response at all at that time, or
Yeah,
do you
good
wait?
question. So, our BC was already en route, and he upgraded
Oh, okay.
the response. He asked for another engine and another medic unit, so that got things going as we were getting dressed.
Okay, good.
And
Do you
then
have like a tech rescue or heavy rescue that?
we have rescue engines that all have extrication equipment on them, but we do not have a dedicated rescue or heavy rescue in our town. So I'm looking at this one lane of travel, and I'm seeing that semi rested up against the pickup, and I look to what was my right, and across the other lane, the opposite lane of travel, in a ditch, is an SUV with a guy pinned underneath it. His motorcycle is yard sailed into a bunch of plastic and parts down that same lane he was traveling. So from what we gathered, and this is kind of a, just to kind of wrap people's brains around it because they can't see it and I'm talking about it hypothetically. The way that this occurred, semi was late to slam on its brakes as traffic was backing up at the intersection. Still going 40 miles an hour, hits an SUV in front of him, pushes that SUV into oncoming traffic, which horrible timing.
Yeah.
Smacks a motorcyclist and then pins him underneath the vehicle as it goes into the ditch across the lane of traffic. Excuse me.
And so when you say pinned underneath, could you access any body part of his? Was his legs pinned?
Yeah, I'll get to that
Okay.
in just a second, but that's a good question. He was wrapped up underneath the rear axle. So where do I go from here?
So where do you park?
Yeah, so we blocked both lanes. We kind of do this, diagonal
Right.
parking job. Our medic unit parked in. There was actually like a coffee shop off to the left of the intersection, so they just parked right in there, and away from the vehicle, away from the accident. And so they bring those two guys come up, and our first after we get out and we're kind of getting a lay of the land. Everybody, of course, is coming up to us, right? Because there's 20 people in cars that have gotten out.
Yeah.
It's pretty gnarly. And they're all bugging us with, hey, this, and this.
Yeah, yeah.
And our sole goal at that point was getting the resources to that SUV to lift it off of the guy that was pinned.
So, okay, ask another question.
Oh, yeah.
So as you're arriving, do you have a specific person that's triage, or do people just go their own way? How does that work?
So initially, the way it was set up was I'm first arriving officer, so I took command, and then my 2-person engine was operating on the driver's side of the vehicle, and my 2-person medic was operating on the passenger side of the vehicle. We split them up that way because getting that rig off of that person was our number one priority. Our BC was still a few minutes behind, so I'm initiating command, but I'm not going to maintain command.
Right.
And we don't have initially any other resources there yet, so it's just us.
Okay.
So initially, the way we set it up was basically 2 people on each side. My firefighter on the engine that day pokes his head down underneath the vehicle, and according to him, the story he tells is he pokes his head down there, and the guy starts talking to him and says, "Hey, I'm in a lot of pain. Can you get this thing off me?" So he relays that information back to me.
Which is a good sign, right?
Yeah.
Chit-chatting.
I mean, holy cow. The guy's mentating and obviously in a lot of pain, but is able to talk. So
this is the part that makes me nervous. Like
the extrication
right
part?
now,
Yeah.
he's alert and
Right.
oriented.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Trust me, I was thinking the same thing. So this sounds horrible, but I think it's just the truth of extrication, right? Your the speed at which you're extricating someone is going to rapidly increase when you have a viable patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, things are going to slow down if you have a deceased patient, right?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
We said it was off into a ditch. So is it like unsteady in a ditch?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you can imagine, basically, this SUV is like a rectangle. Think of it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ditch, like a storm drainage ditch, that it's rested across. So its back tires are on the roadway side,
Mm-hmm.
and its front left tire is on the other side of the ditch.
Oh.
But its front passenger wheel is
Mhm.
just kind of free floated and
Okay.
not secured. So I'm not the extrication guru. I feel comfortable doing standard extrications,
Mhm.
but I'm no means an SME or anything like that. So the first rule, or the first thing we had to do was stabilize the vehicle. And then, the famous saying in extrication is lift an inch, crib an inch. So what that means is anytime you're lifting anything at all, you have to put cribbing to support the progress you've made.
Mm-hmm.
And so around this time, we're kind of getting our bearings around what's going on. Next engine and the BC show up. I drop back to do a face-to-face with the battalion chief, and our engine comes in and brings up their extrication equipment. So the way we broke it up was we grabbed 2 people off of that engine and put 1 person each on each side. So we have 3 people operating on each side. We're using airbags, which are not the typical airbag you think of in a vehicle. It's a lifting device that literally is it looks like a flat piece of rubber
Mm-hmm.
that you inject air into, and it's rated to certain weights that it can hold. And so we've got a couple airbags supporting the left side, but we don't have enough airbags for the right side.
Because you have to fill up the ditch with the cribbing,
Yeah.
and then lift the car.
Correct.
Okay.
And so we basically crib enough on the passenger side, and we used our hydraulic tools to get that extra inch or 2 that we needed to get enough space to pull this guy out. So that's the general layout of what's occurring over the next 10 or 12 minutes. To kind of backtrack a little bit, once my battalion chief gets on scene, he and I do a face-to-face, and as I'm giving him report, one of my firefighters runs back up, and he's like, hey, the guy that we're extricating is saying he's feeling really, really tired and wants to go to sleep.
Oh.
And he says, quote unquote, you have minutes left to get me out of here.
Oh, geez.
Those were his words to our crew.
That's alarming.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean you have that, I'm totally blanking on the term, impending doom.
Impending doom.
Yeah. So we get to, we do the face-to-face, we get that information, start moving a little bit quicker even, and get another medic unit arriving. They stage next to the other one. The third one's coming in, but it's 10 or 12 minutes away. And we get to, I would say, another 2 or 3 minutes goes by. We yard this guy out, and he's, considering what happened, pretty okay.
Can I ask where he was? Was he crushed? Was he pinned?
So he was pinned, but he wasn't crushed.
Okay.
From what we could tell, was run over and then dragged into the ditch. But because that ditch has that storm drainage space, he basically wasn't, the amount that he was dragged across the pavement was about, I would say, less than 10 feet. And then the ground, there was that space, it wasn't pavement that he rested on.
Was he was his clothes stuck on the car? Was it like a body part or?
No, I mean, as far as like what kept him underneath it.
Yeah.
I know one of his legs was wrapped up in the rear axle.
Oh, that'll do it.
And that was, obviously holding him there.
Yeah.
his injuries were, I mean, he had some fractures to his legs. He had a really nasty burn from one of his thighs being up against the muffler. Like, think of a contact burn that just goes through.
Right.
You know.
Oh, God, that'd be miserable.
Yeah. And some broken ribs, but like his head's totally normal. So we pull him out, get him onto a backboard, yard him up this ditch, put him on a gurney, and he gets transported. Talking to the crew that did that transport, it was obviously making him a trauma entry, going through all that criteria, but just pain management on the way up. Didn't even require airway management.
That's good.
So he was pretty lucky.
Did they use pelvic splint?
Yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
we have a
Look at you
SAM
guys.
splint.
Yeah. And I mean, if your transport was any longer than 12 minutes, that's a totally different outcome.
Yeah.
Someone with broken
Well,
ribs, broken legs, possibly a broken pelvis.
And if he'd been, dragged along pavement
Yeah.
until that SUV crashed eventually into a tree across the ditch.
At any point, did you consider air transport? I know
No.
you're close into town, but even with an extrication?
No, it would be against our protocol to do it that close.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. We have to save 20 minutes is the time frame.
Yeah.
So what if, let's say you get there, you realize the patient needs chest tube or needs blood or something like that. Would that change for your
Nope.
protocol?
No, we would transport and do whatever we could do and then give the hospital a heads up.
Okay.
Yep.
We've been on some close-in on the air transport side, like long extrication, like an hour-long extrication that needed blood and chest tube, because you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But those are rare. So.
Yeah.
It's not as much about the transport time as it is the treatment you can do on scene.
Yep.
Okay. All right, continue on.
So that was your only patient?
No, we had two
okay.
more.
Two more, okay. So
the other two...
Who did like the initial triage? I'm just curious.
BC? That was me.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, it was our crew, right? I don't know if this is common terminology, but it's what we do. We do what's called inner and outer circle. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
So basically, firefighter, engineer, or firefighters, whatever you've got, are going to do inner circle, and they're going to triage, the inner part of. You basically draw a circle around the immediate area around the accident, and then a lieutenant or a company officer is going to do the outer circle. Typically, place things like a line for car fires, a fire extinguisher in case something gets out of hand, medical equipment, or stage other tools as needed. And they're also going to walk a 360 around the intersection, around the accident, so that they aren't missing something, right?
Right.
If everybody's unconscious in the vehicle and you miss the fact that one was launched 50 yards into a ditch, that's a big problem. So my crew did the inner circle, said that we had one red patient, two yellows, and the two yellows were in the vehicle that hit the motorcyclist and then subsequently went across the ditch into a tree. And
so not the vehicle the vehicle that was dragging the motorcyclist, there were two people inside that vehicle that were your patient also.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's convenient. They're all right there.
They're all right there. Yeah. The semi and that pickup that I mentioned on the other side of the intersection, or the other side of the lane of travel, they were refusing any sort of treatment. So we get to the spot where we need to extricate the driver and the passenger of that SUV, and that all went pretty straightforward. They were, there wasn't really much going on.
Did you have
with
to
them.
extricate them because they couldn't open their doors, or because they couldn't themselves get out of the car?
I mean, they were larger people. They couldn't get out. They also were complaining of some, neck pain and
gotcha.
Chest pain because of the seatbelt and all that kind of stuff.
What from start of extrication to end of extrication? What was your time frame?
19 minutes.
That's good.
Yeah. 19 minutes from the time we arrived on scene to the time they left for the hospital.
Oh,
It was
that's
19
great.
minutes.
That's
That
real
was-
good.
Yeah, we felt good about that. You know, it's hard not to look back and be critical of yourself
Oh, of
with
course.
all this stuff. And then when you start to see, well, shoot, we did a bunch of stuff right. It's hard to take those wins because you're always so focused on.
Yeah, you're trying to
Yeah,
just
what could I have
getting
done
better.
better?
know I did something wrong.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But overall, man, our crew smoked it. They did a really good job. The part that I haven't shared that was extremely stressful and just it took my mind away from the scene, unfortunately, at times. So it's hard to share exactly what happened without like drawing it on a whiteboard.
Right.
But when that SUV was hit from behind, it had its back windows open. And in the back seat were 3 dogs. 2 of the dogs got launched out of the vehicle at impact. One of the dogs got up after getting launched and ran off, and we don't know where it went. So there was people out looking for it, trying to get it. The other dog that got launched out ended up pinned between the pickup that was hit and the semi that eventually ran into the back of it. So if you can imagine a 2-lane road, on one lane on the far left side is this semi and pickup truck. In the middle is this space that we're essentially creating all of our, we're staging all of our gurneys, we're doing all of our radio traffic and organizing
Extrication
stuff,
tool.
staging all of our tools, yeah. And then on the other far right side is this other vehicle and motorcyclist that's pinned. And so as we're in between these 2 pieces of the accident, behind me is the semi and the dog and pickup mess. And the dog has been critically wounded but is not dead yet. And so it's
my gosh.
actively dying the entire time we're on scene.
Oh my gosh. Is it like making like squealing?
Oh,
making
yeah.
noises?
It's making
Oh my
all the noises
gosh.
you would
Ugh.
expect. And so I'm getting frustrated because I want to put the dog out of its misery.
Mm-hmm.
And our police department they'd been trying to get a hold of animal control, who does, essentially put animals down that need to be put down. And so I'm game planning with my battalion chief, like, hey, can we just load this thing up with some ketamine or something and just put it out of its misery? And we just couldn't get the right people to say yes to it, unfortunately. And we've also, ironically, run into some of the same situations where animals are critically hurt on scenes, and we don't have a good protocol or policy for that. We need to.
And
need
your
to have
law
something in
enforcement
place.
isn't willing to just put a bullet in.
They all wanted
them out
to,
of their
but they
misery.
seemed they were all very well aware that their department's policy is we need to have the right animal control officer on scene to do that specific intervention.
Oh, God.
So the thing that was just, we get back from the call, we're kind of high-fiving because it went really well in a lot of ways. And luckily my crew had no idea what was going on. They couldn't hear the dog.
With the dog.
With the
Yeah.
Oh, with the
the
hydraulics
noise
and
of all the
that.
tools and everything. And so I'm telling them what I had heard, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible. We didn't know that was going on." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just, glad that it was only myself and the battalion chief that had knowledge of that." So over the course of like the next 3 days, and this is kind of where, moving on from the call.
Right.
Of course, the next 3 days, I'm noticing that like I'm irritable. I'm more on edge than normal. I'm just grumpy, and I would just say overall irritated for seemingly no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And, the 3 of us have talked a lot about mental health and taking care of yourself. And so after a couple of days of kind of going, what the heck, I'm realizing like this call's bugging me, and I've got some residual undealt with stuff that I need to go talk about.
Which is a huge win.
Yeah.
By the way, the recognizing.
Right.
That's a lot of growth.
Yeah, it is. It's a ton of growth because that would have never been on my radar 5 years ago. So, I call up. I get I have a counselor that we see, my wife and I see, and I talked to her about it and just downloaded what was going on, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, Steve, that's awful," you know. And I got to just get it off my chest because it was there. I wasn't really fully dealing with it because it was so strange because it was closely tied to what we would consider a win. You know, like
Right.
we train
Right.
for rapid extrications and we got to do one
Yeah.
and it went well. But it was also tied with this horrible thing going on behind us that we had no control over. So it reminded me of the difference between, reminded me of a couple of things. First off, the body keeps the score, talking about how we receive information right into our thalamus, sensory input. So sight, smell, sound, touch, all those things that we talk about. That goes straight to the thalamus. From there, and I'm looking at this diagram that Dr. Van der Kolk has in his book. It goes to the amygdala, where the amygdala is basically determining significance of that event. And for most memories that you see and hear and smell and touch and everything else and process, that amygdala sends it to the hippocampus where it gets organized from this, and then it goes to the cingulate and then to the prefrontal cortex, and you have this nice, well-filed memory. But with stuff like this, where the amygdala goes, hey, this is a really significant memory and it's really stressful, it actually kicks out stress hormones into the hypothalamus. And so, we've talked about it before, and I've heard a variety of different things that people try to relate I would say, not well-processed memories as. And for me, it's always basketballs in the filing drawer. You can't slam the drawer shut. You can't close the folder that drawer holds. And the fact that your body can't categorize it and store it appropriately kicks out stress hormones, and you start seeing symptomology from that.
And that goes back to the science of the prefrontal cortex being offline during an event like that, which means your hippocampus is offline too. There's nowhere to file it.
Right.
Even if you wanted to.
And so you have this, I'm looking at other common symptoms that occur from this, and irritability is a major one. Aggression, trouble concentrating, trouble sleeping, feeling detached or a little numb immediately after, in the days, and weeks after. And eventually, if those things aren't dealt with and the symptomology continues, it coalesces into PTSD after a month,
After a month?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because we were just doing a training on every person being a peer. And after a call like that, going through all of the senses or being like, how did that call go? What do you remember the most? What did it smell like? Did you hear anything weird? Like, going through all of those senses, once you're out of the fight or flight and your prefrontal cortex is back online and your hippocampus is back online, going through all of those things with each other, even if it's a 5-minute conversation, can really help refile things away so you don't have that.
And so he was starting processing it that day, right, when he was talking with the crews. He probably didn't let everything out. You were still trying to, trying to
still dealing with little bits of it, right?
Right.
And so it's not so massive that I feel completely detached from my surroundings. I feel like I'm in fight or flight mode, or I feel like I am I'm not safe. Anything like that. I just hadn't dealt with it.
Yeah.
I'd started the process. You're right, by talking, doing the bumper chats that we do, hot washing, whatever people call it, and you just check in with one another, and that's a part of it. Like, it's absolutely a part of it. But for those ones that need more attention beyond that, it's so vital to have a counselor or more people that you can go talk to. And I really enjoy talking to people that aren't firefighters or paramedics.
Really?
Yeah. But they have to have medical training. Like, and I'm not trying to puff up Holly here, but like a nurse who can ask questions
Here we go.
is so awesome. And I've got a couple nurse friends that, yeah, what was that like? Tell me, and you're trying to explain some of it, which helps you kind of go back a little bit and, process through.
I can understand that because some people might be like, what extrication tools did you use?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you use
Instead
the
of-
spreaders?
We can do it better than that.
Right.
Yeah.
18 minutes,
Yeah. We would have been 10 or less.
Right. Yeah. So that more objective approach to it.
Totally. But yeah, that was the call, and that was the end result. And I think that having that safety net to fall back on is so, like, it's. I would never do this job without it.
So here you are. You run a business, right? You have family, all that kind of stuff. You have all this chronic stress going on.
Yeah.
And then you have this acute thing happen, which is huge. I mean, I can't imagine the dog, right? I just can't imagine that. That is just.
Yeah.
I've dealt with deer and things like that, but never a dog.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that, and if you didn't have that safety net, that could be the whole. Even if it's not as significant as maybe a dead baby or something, but that could be the thing that just topples it over.
Yeah.
And it seems like those are the parts of the event that keep coming back to you. Like we talked with Ben on a previous podcast about the color of the water and the lake in front of his house. Or like for you, for example, it was a T-shirt or just being able to like embody those feelings because you had a child that age. I mean, sometimes it's not even the big call. It's like those random things, like the sounds or music that was playing in the background or things like that can tip you over.
It's all sensory inputs.
It is all sensory.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that when we first talked with you about your PTSD story, you had no personal awareness of those feelings that you have now.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, like this 10 years ago, this call would have just sat there and accumulated, and you would have been pissed off and
it would have been
terrible for your family to be around. And
another thing on the plate for sure.
Yeah. So that awareness is really important.
Yeah.
And telling stories about it is really important too, because we've all felt that way.
Yeah.
And like, why am I so irritable today?
I mean, you're still processing it and dealing with it right now by just talking about it on the podcast.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So.
And I think when we say processing and dealing with it, people are like, oh, it's fine. It's really not that big of a deal. And it doesn't have to be a big deal.
No.
It's just the little things that we see and hear and do every day. They all need to be put away appropriately.
I've got one more call. Very similar, I would say similar amount of significance, similar amount of residual symptoms. So, you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Let me give you some background information about the day that we're dealing with. I'm on a 3-person crew, and we go see the same guy twice in a day. People call on his behalf, and then when we get there, he doesn't want to go to the hospital, but he's
So a houseless individual?
Yeah.
Okay.
Transient male, newer to town.
Okay.
And looks really disheveled. I never smelled alcohol on him or anything like that. It was much more of a mental health type issue. Don't know if he was using drugs. Never got to that point with him. But we've been hearing about people going on calls for this guy, and then we see him twice that day. Cops call us for an eval on the second one. We can't make the guy go. He's alert and oriented enough to make his own decisions.
So question for you.
Yeah.
What is your cap talk going on? I mean, I know what mine would have been.
We're wondering if it's the same guy.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't know if it's the same guy for sure because this is the first day that we've dealt with him. But we're all wondering, are we going back on this guy again? Because it was within a decent walking distance of the previous one.
Okay.
And we know he's on foot. So we're wondering,
Are you?
sounds like the same guy. It's probably the same guy.
Irritated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're absolutely irritated.
Okay. Because that changes I mean, it changed my level of care and assessment.
Yeah. I mean, we also recognize that like our crew has a rule like you can bitch as much as you want on the way to the call, and as soon as you step out of that rig, your attitude has to change.
I love it.
And so we generally give ourselves a 5 to 8 minute bitch session, and then we hop out and we're professional.
Well, that's therapeutic in its own way.
Yeah. So we get to. So that's the background of the day.
Okay.
We go to bed, wake up around 11:30-ish.
I'm sorry. One sec. Have you already
Yeah.
gone on him twice, or you've only gone on him
We've
once?
already gone on him twice.
Okay.
So this is fast forward after that last call.
Okay, got it.
It was probably 4 hours prior to
And it was just someone called on his behalf. He didn't want you there. Okay.
Yep.
No medical need at that
no
time.
medical need at that time. So cops call us for a code 3 medical. And we get in the rig, we're looking at the CAD notes, and they are mentioning that there is a middle-aged man who was pulled over for a possible DUI, and he's complaining of chest pain. So we're like, okay, well, here we are going to this call. So it's at a building downtown, kind of near the main area of our town. Just a lot of tall buildings there.
Okay.
So we show up and we don't see any cop vehicle. So I'm trying to find out exactly where we're at. Get a hold of dispatch. They say officer's going to come up and chat with you guys. Well, this officer comes running up from this parking garage that was a floor below this building. Kind of pops her head out and is like, "Hey guys, he's down here." And we're like, "Oh, okay, he's in a parking garage. I thought this was a traffic stop."
Right.
You know? So we have the gear for a chest pain medical call.
Mm-hmm.
And we walk down to this, I would say it's like the entrance before you go into a parking garage?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like right before that. And this building was 3 stories above ground, but then it had this, area you could drive down and then go under into a 1-story parking garage. Well, we round the corner, and the lady, as we're rounding the corner, says, "Yeah, he jumped." And we're like, "What happened to the
You're
drunk
like, wait a
chest
minute.
pain guy?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Huh? No, that's not. This guy jumped from the top of the building." And we're like, "What?"
Oh, you weren't ready for this.
So get an engine, get a BC coming. And
He's alive.
yeah, barely. He jumps from the 4th floor. He's in a puddle of blood.
And
his
he
legs are
landed
in.
inside the parking
So-
garage?
I'm trying to visualize that part.
So he landed just outside the entrance to the
Oh,
parking
got it.
garage.
Oh,
Okay. So you
okay.
didn't have to actually go into it, just
No.
on like the sidewalk area
Gotcha.
in front.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the 3 stories above ground with the 1 story below
Right.
ground, 4 stories total, right? So it's the same guy
that you've
that
dealt
we've been
with.
going on earlier that day. He got trespassed from the ER, and then the cops are taking him back to book him at the station, and he breaks free, runs up to the top of this outside staircase, jumps.
Jesus.
So we're like completely blown away that we're now dealing with this, right? It caught everybody so off guard.
Yeah.
We're trying to relay our location to the incoming units. We're trying to, bandage this guy up. He's got open fracture everything.
Yeah.
He's just a mess. Get a line on him. He's got a decent blood pressure. We give him some Versed and some fentanyl and wrap him up. And we, transport him code 3.
Conscious, unconscious?
Initially conscious, kind of going in and out
Mm.
on transfer. And en route, it was more of the same. We intubated him. manage his airway, dropped him
Nice.
off. And so we get to the ER, give the pass down, and then we're kind of talking to the cops afterwards, and they're like messed up.
Oh,
You know, they just
can you imagine
they're
that?
walking a guy to the booking area
Yeah.
outside, and he breaks
Oh, they
free
were
from their
walking.
grasp,
Okay, I was like, did he
runs
jump out
upstairs.
of the car?
sees another cop coming at him, and just jumps. And so they're like
Oh,
just beside themselves. They had to hear and see that. You
Yeah.
know? We're talking to them. They're beat up about it too. And we end up going back to our station. We chit-chat about it as a crew. And again, it's one of those things where like we had this weird pairing of a trauma call that went really, really well, paired with a, oh my gosh, that caught us so off guard.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We were not ready for that. We had to send one guy back to get all of our trauma equipment that we didn't have with us because we didn't
Oh,
expect to be on a trauma
Yeah.
call.
Yep.
And so, he's running up the entry to this, parking garage entrance, and just, it was less than ideal. But very similar to that first call, over the course of about a week, I'm realizing that I'm just irritated, and I'm tired, and I'm exhausted for no seemingly good reason. And it took me longer on that one to figure out what was going on.
This is before you. How many years ago was this?
This was shortly after, like, my complete recovery from
Okay.
the PTSD stuff. So this was like 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
Probably 3 years ago. Yeah, it was a summertime call in the COVID era. So
Okay.
2-3 years ago. And luckily got to go home, kind of debrief it with my wife, and then had coffee with a buddy the next day. And I'm not really doing this on purpose, but I'm catching myself, segmentally processing this whole thing. And my buddy wasn't on the call, but he's another lieutenant in our organization. So we're having coffee, and I'm telling about it, and he's like, holy cow, man. Like, that's insane, and I'm starting to kind of pick up on, oh, yeah, like, this is a significant event,
Yeah.
And it's so weird when you're in it, you don't necessarily consider
Mhm.
it. But when you get that 1,000-foot view of someone else's
Yeah.
experience, you can call it out real easily.
How different do you think it would have been for you had you been called on a jumper? You know you're going on a jumper, so your mindset's already there.
Mhm.
How different do you think it would have been for you?
We would have processed it after that call and been done.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the complete getting caught off guard
Yeah.
part.
Because you kind of feel
Really
like
threw us
you
for a loop.
were a shit show,
Yeah.
basically, right?
We don't
Well,
like
you
going into
also
things
have
unprepared.
The familiarity of knowing the person too.
Mm-hmm.
Most of
Yeah,
our patients are like complete strangers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
this one you'd already seen twice that day.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that whole element too.
Yeah, that's a good point. But
Jeez, Steve.
I think the take-home point for this podcast that I think we want to get across is safety nets are so important, and creating those good habits now. It's never too late to start, but
Yeah.
the sooner you can, the better. Because there's just so much good that comes from it, and when you're maxed out because of an event, a call, whatever, having that to fall back on is so important.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a counselor when you're in a crisis, like just making phone calls when you're in a crisis is like a monumental task
Right.
sometimes. You don't have
Yeah,
the
really tough.
patience. And just, I don't know, it's free.
Mm-hmm.
EAP is free for however many visits, right? So go and
Start
interview
there.
some. Yeah.
Talk to people that
Before
have been
the
to other
event.
ones.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, you've got the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes when I go to my shrink, I'm like, we just chit-chatted. You just charged me to socialize with you for an hour. But sometimes that's what it is,
Right.
and if you can socialize, I guess, with your shrink, that's good. So
It's a good therapeutic relationship.
it doesn't always have to be that I have something really important to talk about.
Yeah.
It could just be like, hey, I have this really high-stress job.
Mm-hmm.
I might need you someday. So let's start
Yeah.
talking.
And here's the update on the last stuff that we talked about.
Yeah.
Just giving updates is great.
And then
too.
you can interview them and see if they can handle the stuff you're about to say.
Yeah, that's always the hard part. Sometimes you're going to run into therapists that can't handle the
Yeah.
stuff that we see and deal with. So you got to find someone who's culturally competent.
Mm-hmm.
That's our episode.
That was good, Steve.
That was good. I appreciated chatting with you guys about that. It's always therapeutic for me,
Yeah.
and I think for all of us when we get to talk about stuff we've seen and dealt with. And
Storytelling is so powerful. It's part of the therapy. It's like the biggest part.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it there, and we'll catch everybody on the next one. But thanks for hanging out today and chit-chatting, guys.
Thanks for the coffee.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for joining us.